Pam Bondi walked into the courtroom holding a sealed envelope that could destroy Diddy's hidden criminal empire. Everyone in the room went silent. What secrets were inside that envelope, and why was everyone terrified to see what it contained? Attorney General Pam Bondi walked through the courthouse metal detectors with her high heels making sharp sounds on the stone floor. She held a black briefcase that stayed with her for 3 whole days. Inside were documents that would shock everyone. Ms. Bondi, the other lawyers, want to delay the trial again. Her helper Marcus Williams said quietly as they headed to the courtroom. They say they need more time to look at the new evidence. No way, Bondi said with force. We gave them all the time the law says we have to. Sean Combs has avoided punishment for too long. Judge Patricia Morrison was already sitting when they walked in. The defense lawyers, led by attorney Jonathan Fitzgerald, sat next to their client. Sean Diddy Combs looked calm, but his fingers tapped nervously on the desk. Your Honor, Fitzgerald stood up quickly. We officially asked for more time. The other side gave us evidence we haven't had enough time to study. Judge Morrison fixed her glasses. Ms. Bondi, what kind of evidence is this? Bondi walked to the judge's desk and took out a sealed brown envelope from her briefcase. Your Honor, this has papers showing Mr. Combs was part of a huge criminal group. It has money records, messages, and people willing to tell the truth about how big his operations were. I don't like this dramatic show. Fitzgerald jumped up. This is clearly just for attention. Mr. Fitzgerald, you'll get your turn to talk, Judge Morrison said calmly. She looked at the sealed envelope. Ms. Bondi, when did you get this evidence? 3 days ago, Your Honor. It came from a witness who was scared for their life. We needed time to make sure it was real and keep the witness safe. Diddy leaned over to his lawyer and whispered something urgent. Fitzgerald's face turned white as he listened. Your Honor, Fitzgerald tried again. My client's rights are being hurt. This last-minute evidence is unfair. Bondi turned to look at the defense table. Mr. Combs had years to think about what he did, so the victims didn't get time to prepare. Judge Morrison raised her hand. Look at this evidence in my private office. Court will stop for 2 hours. Ms. Bondi, I want your main detective ready to answer questions. As everyone left the courtroom, Detective Sarah Chen walked up to Bondi. Ma'am, the witness who gave us that envelope just went into hiding. They're really scared. What's their name? Rebecca Torres? She was part of Combs' close group for 5 years. She wrote down everything. Parties, money deals, how they found new victims. Bondi nodded seriously. We knew this wouldn't be easy. She's safe for now? For now, but word is getting out. Combs. People know someone talked. Outside the courthouse, reporter Michelle Adams pushed a microphone toward anyone who would speak. The sealed envelope has everyone guessing. Sources think it has proof of human trafficking and organized crime bigger than anything we've seen before. Fitzgerald came out of a side door, staying away from most reporters. His phone kept ringing with calls from Combs' friends, all asking the same thing. What was in that envelope? Meanwhile, Bondi sat in her temporary office looking at the contents one more time. Money transfers to secret accounts, photos from private parties, and worst of all, odd recordings where Combs talked about his illegal business in clear detail. This is bigger than we first thought, she told her assistant Thomas Rodriguez. We're not just putting one man on trial. We're destroying an entire criminal network. The evidence showed a picture of organized abuse with Combs at the center of a group that worked across many states and involved dozens of helpers. Judge Morrison came back to the bench looking stern. The sealed envelope sat open in front of her, its contents having shown her a disturbing picture during her private review. After looking at the evidence from the prosecution, I say it can be used, she announced. Mr. Fitzgerald, your request for delay is rejected. We will continue. Fitzgerald stood up slowly, his usual confidence shaken. Your Honor, we respectfully ask to look at these materials right away. You'll get access during lunch break. Ms. Bondi, call your first witness. The prosecution calls Rebecca Torres. Quiet fell over the courtroom as Torres entered. She was thin and nervous, but her eyes showed determination. Federal guards walked beside her as she took the witness chair. Ms. Torres, Bondi began, How long did you work for Mr. Combs? 5 years, from 2018 to 2023. Her voice was steady despite her clear fear. What was your job? It was officially called an event planner. But my real job was finding young women for his parties and handling his personal business. Diddy whispered urgently to Fitzgerald, who wrote notes frantically. Can you tell us about these parties? Torres took a deep breath. They weren't parties. They were chances for Mr. Combs to control people. He would record everything, then use the videos to blackmail important guests. Objection. Fitzgerald jumped up. Guessing and rumors. Sustained, Judge Morrison ruled. But the damage was done. The jury had heard enough. Bondi continued. Div, Miss Torres, did you write down any of these activities? Yes. I kept detailed records because I was afraid. I knew what we were doing was wrong, but I was trapped. He threatened my family. Can you? Identify Exhibit A. Bondi held up a leather notebook. That's my record book. It has names, dates, payments, and details of each event from 2019 to 2023. During lunch break, Detective Chen told Bondi about new developments. We've arrested 3 more helpers based on Torres' testimony. Marcus Thompson, who handled security at the parties, Lisa Rodriguez, who managed money transfers, and David Kim, who found victims from modeling agencies. What are they saying? Thompson is ready to help us. He has video evidence stored in many places. Rodriguez is saying she didn't know what the money was for, but her bank records tell a different story. Kim wants immunity in exchange for testimony. Bondi thought about this. Give Kim limited immunity. We need his testimony about how they found victims. That afternoon, lawyer James Mitchell took over asking questions. Ms. Torres, can you explain the money structure of Mr. Combs' operations? He used many fake companies to move money. Payments to women were disguised as modeling fees or appearance payments. The real money went to silencing people and buying protection. What kind of protection? He had connections everywhere. Police officers, judges, politicians, people who owed him favors or were compromised by coming to his events. The jury looked disturbed. Several members took lots of notes. Fitzgerald's questioning was aggressive but didn't work well. Ms. Torres, isn't it true you're testifying to reduce your own possible charges? I'm testifying because I couldn't live with staying quiet anymore. You worked for Mr. Combs for 5 years. Why didn't you report these supposed crimes earlier? Torres' voice broke a little, because I was scared. Because people who crossed him had a way of disappearing or having accidents. Do you have proof of these supposed disappearances? Jennifer Walsh. She tried to leave in 2020. 2 weeks later, she died in a car accident. The police report said brake failure, but she had just told me she feared for her life. The courtroom exploded. Judge Morrison called for order while Fitzgerald objected strongly. As court ended, news vans surrounded the building. Reporter Michelle Adams gave her evening broadcast. Day 2 of the Combs trial has shown shocking claims of a criminal network that may have worked for over 10 years. With more witnesses scheduled to testify, this case keeps getting bigger. The next morning, FBI financial crime expert Agent Michael Harrison took the stand carrying 3 thick folders of bank records and financial studies. Agent Harrison, Prosecutor Mitchell began, can you summarize your investigation into Mr. Combs' financial activities? Asterisk, asterisk, over 6 months, we traced money flows through 17 different bank accounts, 12 fake companies, and multiple offshore accounts. The pattern shows organized laundering of money from illegal activities. Bondi displayed a complex chart on the courtroom screen. Can you explain this diagram to the jury? This shows how money flowed from Mr. Combs' legal businesses into accounts controlled by the criminal group. Between 2018 and 2023, about $47 million was processed through these channels. Diddy's face stayed calm, but his lawyer Fitzgerald looked more and more worried. What was this money used for? 3 main purposes. First, payments to victims to keep them quiet. Second, bribes to officials and protection services. Third, funding. The operations of the criminal activities, transportation, security, facility, rentals. Asterisk, Agent Harrison clicked to the next slide. This spreadsheet was found on Miss Rodriguez's computer. Shows payments labeled as consulting fees that actually went to silence victims. Can you give specific examples? Amanda Foster received $50,000. In 2019, after signing a silence agreement, the payment was disguised as a fee for brand consulting services through a company that only existed on paper. Prosecutor Mitchell showed bank statements with regular transfers. What do these transactions represent? Monthly payments of $5,000 to various law enforcement officials? The notes say they were for security consulting, but our investigation shows these people provided early warning of raids and investigations. The jury looked shocked. One member shook her head in disbelief. During questioning, Fitzgerald tried to discredit the evidence. Agent Harrison, isn't it possible these were real business transactions? Given the pattern and the testimony of cooperating witnesses, that's extremely unlikely. But you can't definitely prove criminal intent from bank records alone, can you? In isolation? No. But combined with witness testimony, physical evidence, and the coded language used in communications, the criminal intent is clear. That afternoon, cooperating witness Marcus Thompson testified about the security operations. My job was to ensure privacy at Mr. Combs' events, Thompson explained. That meant taking phones, posting guards, and making sure certain activities weren't seen by the wrong people. What kind of activities? Sexual assault, drug use, and the filming of compromising situations involving guests. Did Mr. Combs personally direct these activities? Absolutely. He would give specific instructions about who to target and what to document. He called it insurance. Can you identify the voices on this recording? The courtroom listened as Diddy's voice clearly told Thompson about managing a specific guest. Make sure that Senator's activity tonight is well documented. We might need his cooperation on some legislation next year. The impact was immediate. Several jury members looked directly at Diddy with obvious disgust. Defense attorney Fitzgerald objected repeatedly, but the evidence was overwhelming. During a brief break, he huddled with Diddy and whispered urgently about plea negotiations. Client maintains his innocence, Fitzgerald told the press afterward. These witnesses are compromised individuals seeking to reduce their own sentences. But inside the courthouse, momentum was clearly with the prosecution. Detective Chen updated Bondi on new developments. 2 more victims have come forward since Thompson's testimony. They're willing to testify about specific incidents. How credible? Are they very? Their accounts match details only someone who was actually there would know. Plus, we found supporting evidence in Thompson's security logs. As the day ended, Bondi reviewed her trial strategy. The financial evidence had established the scope of the criminal enterprise. Witness testimony had provided specific details about operations. Now she needed to connect everything directly to Diddy himself and prove his leadership role beyond. Any doubt? Text messages, emails, and recorded phone calls that show Combs directing every aspect of this organization. The trial was building toward its climax, with each day revealing new layers of the extensive criminal network that prosecutors claimed Diddy had built and controlled for years. FBI cybercrimes agent Lisa Park entered the courtroom carrying multiple laptops and external drives. Her testimony would provide the most damaging evidence yet against Sean Combs. Agent Park, Bondi began. What did your digital investigation reveal? You recovered over 15,000 text messages, 8,000 emails, and 200 hours of recorded phone conversations. From devices seized during the raids on Mr. Combs' properties, the jury leaned forward as Park displayed messages on the courtroom screen. This text exchange from March 2022 shows Mr. Combs instructing associate David Kim about recruiting new victims. She read aloud, "Find me 3 new girls for next weekend. College age, ambitious. Use the modeling contract story." Fitzgerald objected. Your Honor, there's no proof my client sent these messages. Agent Park, how did you verify authenticity? Judge Morrison asked. We confirmed the phone numbers through carrier records, matched the writing patterns with known samples, and verified. Message content with witness testimony? Bondi introduced another exhibit. What does this email exchange show? Communications between Mr. Combs and financial manager Lisa Rodriguez about silencing victim Amanda Foster? The subject line reads, Foster's situation requires immediate attention. Park. Clicked to the next message. Mr. Combs writes, "Pay her whatever it takes. Get the NDA signed. This cannot go public before the Grammy nominations." The jury looked horrified as more messages revealed the calculated nature of the criminal enterprise. This phone recording from July 2021 captures Mr. Combs discussing blackmail strategy with Ed's security chief Marcus Thompson. The courtroom listened as Diddy's voice explained, "We have footage of the judge from last year's party. If the warrant gets approved, remind him about his wife and kids." Defense attorney Fitzgerald desperately tried to discredit the evidence. "Agent Park, isn't it possible these recordings were manipulated? We used advanced audio analysis. The recordings are authentic and unaltered." "But you can't prove my client knew he was being recorded, can you?" "Actually, we can." Wearing a wire for federal investigators during the last 6 months of his employment, the revelation stunned the courtroom. Thompson had been an FBI informant while still working for Diddy. That afternoon, victim Amanda Foster took the stand. Her testimony would be the most emotionally devastating yet. "Ms. Foster," Prosecutor Mitchell said gently, "can you tell the jury about your experience with Mr. Combs?" "I was 19 when I met him at a modeling event in 2019. He promised to help my career, invited me to a private party. What happened at this party?" Foster's voice wavered. "He drugged my drink. When I woke up, I was in a bedroom with no memory of several hours. There were cameras everywhere." "What did Mr. Combs tell you afterward?" "He said I had a choice: keep quiet and receive modeling opportunities, or have the footage released to destroy my reputation." "Did you report this to police?" "I tried, but within days the detective I spoke to called and said the case was being dropped due to lack of evidence." Bondi presented Foster's NDA and the $50,000 payment. "Why did you finally decide to testify?" "Because I couldn't let him keep hurting people. When I saw other women coming forward, I knew I had to help stop him." During cross-examination, Fitzgerald was notably gentle, aware that attacking a victim would backfire with the jury. "Ms. Foster, you received substantial compensation. Wasn't this payment for legitimate modeling work?" "No, it was hush money. I never did any modeling work for him." Meanwhile, outside the courthouse, more victims were coming forward daily. Detective Chen coordinated with victim advocates as new allegations emerged. "We have 12 more women ready to testify," Chen reported to Bondi during a break. Their stories follow the same pattern: recruitment, assault, blackmail, and payoffs. As the day ended, legal analyst Robert Martinez provided commentary for the evening news. "The digital evidence presented today creates an almost impossible defense scenario. The messages show clear criminal intent and direct involvement by Combs himself." The courtroom atmosphere grew heavy as Prosecutor James Mitchell announced the next phase of testimony. "Your Honor, the prosecution will now present testimony from multiple victims to establish the pattern and scope of Mr. Combs' criminal enterprise." Judge Morrison addressed the packed courtroom. "I remind everyone that these proceedings involve sensitive testimony. Any disruption will result in immediate removal." The first victim, Sarah Martinez, a 24-year-old aspiring actress, took the stand with visible nervousness. "Ms. Martinez, how did you first encounter Mr. Combs?" Mitchell asked. "At a talent showcase in Los Angeles in 2020, his representative approached me about a music video opportunity. What happened next? I was invited to a private audition at his Miami mansion. When I arrived, there were other young women there, and the atmosphere felt wrong immediately." Martinez described being given drinks that made her feel disoriented. "I remember being led to a bedroom, but everything after that is fragmented. I woke up the next morning with no memory of several hours." "Did Mr. Combs contact you afterward?" "Yes. He called personally and said I had been impressive and that he had big plans for my career. But first I needed to sign some paperwork." Paperwork was a comprehensive NDA with severe financial penalties for violation. "He made it clear that speaking about the party would end my career and leave me financially ruined," Martinez testified. Defense attorney Fitzgerald's cross-examination was careful but pointed. "Ms. Martinez, you continued accepting invitations to Mr. Combs' events after this alleged incident, correct?" "Yes, because I was afraid. He made it seem like my career depended on staying in his good graces." The second victim, Jennifer Walsh's sister, Katie Walsh, provided testimony about her deceased sibling. Jennifer told me she was being blackmailed by Mr. Combs, Katie explained through tears. She had tried to leave his circle, but he threatened to release compromising videos. What happened to your sister? She died in a car accident 2 weeks. After she told me she was going to the police, the brake lines had been cut, but the investigation was closed without charges. Bondi presented phone records showing multiple calls between Jennifer Walsh and various associates of Combs in the weeks before her death. The third victim, former model Diana Thompson, testified about the systematic nature of the abuse. There was a whole process, Thompson explained. First, they would identify vulnerable young women, usually those new to the industry or facing financial difficulties. Then came the invitation to exclusive parties. What happened at these parties? They were carefully orchestrated. Drugs were put in drinks, cameras recorded everything. And by the end of the night, Mr. Combs had leverage over everyone present. How many parties did you attend? Over 20 between 2018 and 2022. Each time I hoped it would be different, but it was always the same pattern. Thompson's testimony revealed the industrial scale of the operation. Guest lists, security protocols, and cleanup procedures all pointed to a sophisticated criminal enterprise. During a brief recess, victim advocate Maria Gonzalez spoke with Bondi about the psychological impact on witnesses. These women are incredibly brave to testify, Gonzalez said. But the trauma is real. Some have been in therapy for years dealing with what happened to them. Are they all committed to seeing this through? Absolutely. They know this might be their only chance to get justice. That evening, Diddy's legal team held an emergency strategy session. The victim testimony was devastating their case. We need to shift tactics, Fitzgerald told his associates. The evidence is overwhelming. We should consider plea negotiations. But Diddy refused. I'm not pleading guilty to anything. These women are lying for money. His arrogance frustrated his legal team, who could see the writing on the wall. The prosecution had built an airtight case, and the jury was clearly convinced of his guilt. News coverage that night focused on the emotional testimony. The victim's courage in facing their abuser has been remarkable, reported Michelle Adams. Their consistent accounts have painted a picture of systematic abuse that spanned years. Dr. Rachel Stevens, a renowned psychologist specializing in trauma and abuse patterns, took the stand as the prosecution's expert witness. Dr. Stevens. Bondi began, based on your review of the evidence and victim testimonies, what patterns do you observe? The behaviors described are consistent with organized predatory conduct. Mr. Combs used classic manipulation, techniques, isolation, coercion, and systematic exploitation of power imbalances. Can you explain these techniques to the jury? Predators like this create environments where victims feel they have no choice but to comply. They use career opportunities as bait, then leverage shame and fear to maintain control. The recording of compromising situations is a standard blackmail tactic. Dr. Stevens displayed a psychological profile chart. The victims' testimonies show remarkable consistency in describing their experiences. This isn't coincidental. It reflects a deliberate, practiced methodology. Fitzgerald challenged the expert testimony. Dr. Stevens, you never personally examined Mr. Combs, correct? Correct. But I analyzed extensive evidence of his behavior patterns and their psychological impact on victims. Isn't it possible these women are coordinating their stories for financial gain? The trauma responses I observed are genuine and consistent with actual abuse. The psychological details cannot be fabricated convincingly. After expert testimony concluded, both sides prepared for closing arguments. The trial had lasted 3 weeks and presented overwhelming evidence of Combs' criminal enterprise. Bondi stood to deliver the prosecution's closing argument. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, over the past 3 weeks, you have heard testimony from dozens of witnesses, seen thousands of pieces of evidence, and listened to the defendant's own words planning and executing these crimes. She gestured toward the evidence table. The financial records show $47 million flowing through criminal enterprises. The digital evidence reveals Mr. Combs personally directing every aspect of these operations. The victim testimony demonstrates the human cost of his actions. This was not a series of isolated incidents. This was a sophisticated criminal organization designed to exploit vulnerable women and silence anyone who threatened to expose the truth. Bondi's voice grew stronger. Mr. Combs believed his wealth and influence made him untouchable. He believed he could, by silence, intimidate victims and corrupt officials with impunity. Today you have the power to prove him wrong. The evidence demands a guilty verdict on all counts. Justice demands accountability for these heinous crimes. Defense attorney Fitzgerald faced an impossible task in his closing argument. Members of the jury, prosecution wants you to believe that successful business relationships and adult consensual activities constitute criminal behavior. They have presented a parade of witnesses seeking financial compensation and media attention. Argument felt hollow after weeks of devastating evidence. Even Fitzgerald seemed to lack conviction in his own words. My client has dedicated his life to music and entertainment. He has made mistakes, but he is not the criminal mastermind the prosecution has portrayed. The jury looked skeptical. Fitzgerald's closing was brief, recognizing the futility of his position. Judge Morrison provided final jury instructions. You must base your verdict solely on the evidence presented in this courtroom. The defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. As the jury retired for deliberations, courthouse observers expected a quick verdict. The evidence was overwhelming, the witness testimony credible, the defense virtually non-existent. Diddy sat quietly at the defense table, finally seeming to grasp the gravity of his situation. His empire was crumbling. His associates had testified against him, and his victims had found their voices. Outside, victim advocate Maria Gonzalez addressed the media. Regardless of the verdict, these brave women have already achieved something important. They have broken their silence and exposed a predator. Reporter Michelle Adams concluded her coverage. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury now holds Sean Combs' fate in their hands. Legal experts predict deliberations will be brief given the strength of the prosecution's case. The wait for justice was almost over. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours before requesting to return to the courtroom. Judge Morrison called all parties back at 3:30 p.m. Has the jury reached a verdict? She asked jury foreman. Robert Kim stood. Yes, Your Honor, we have. The courtroom fell silent. Diddy sat motionless beside his attorney Fitzgerald, who looked defeated. On the charge of racketeering conspiracy, how do you find? Guilty, Your Honor. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Several victims began crying with relief. On the charge of sex trafficking by force, fraud, and coercion, how do you find guilty? On the charge of transportation for prostitution, how? Do you find guilty? Judge Morrison continued through all 17 charges. Each verdict was the same, guilty. Diddy's face remained expressionless, but his hands trembled slightly. Fitzgerald placed a supportive hand on his client's shoulder. On the additional charges of bribery, money laundering, and witness intimidation, how do you find? Guilty on all counts, Your Honor? The courtroom erupted. Victims embraced their families while reporters frantically typed on their phones. Judge Morrison called for order. Attorney General Pam Bondi felt a wave of satisfaction. 3 years of investigation had led to complete vindication. The jury is dismissed with the court's gratitude, Judge Morrison announced. A sentencing will be scheduled for 6 weeks from today. Mr. Combs will remain in custody pending sentencing. Outside the courthouse, Bondi addressed the media. Today, justice was served for the dozens of victims who suffered under Sean Combs' criminal enterprise. No one is above the law, regardless of wealth or fame. Victim Amanda Foster spoke through tears. I never thought this day would come. For years, I believed he was untouchable. Today proves that survivors' voices matter. Defense attorney Fitzgerald announced plans to appeal. We respect the jury's decision, but believe significant legal errors occurred during the trial. We will pursue all available remedies. Detective Sarah Chen reflected on the investigation with her colleagues. This case changed how we approach celebrity criminal enterprises. The scope was unprecedented. FBI agent Lisa Park added, The digital evidence was crucial. Without those recordings and messages, proving his direct involvement would have been much harder. That evening, news coverage focused on the historic nature of the verdict. Legal analyst Robert Martinez explained, "This conviction sends a message that celebrity status cannot shield someone from accountability for serious crimes." The victims' families celebrated quietly, knowing that while justice had been served, the trauma would take years to heal. Diddy spent his first night as a convicted felon in federal custody, his music empire in ruins and his legacy forever tarnished. Meanwhile, prosecutors began preparing for the sentencing phase, gathering victim impact statements and compiling evidence of the full scope of harm caused by Combs' criminal organization. The trial had ended. But the consequences were just beginning. 6 weeks later, the courtroom was packed for Sean Combs' sentencing hearing. Judge Morrison had reviewed hundreds of pages of victim impact statements and sentencing memoranda. "Mr. Combs, please stand," Judge Morrison commanded. Diddy rose slowly, wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of his customary expensive suits. The transformation was stark. "Before I impose sentence, I want to address the scope and severity of your crimes. Over 5 years, you operated a criminal enterprise that systematically exploited vulnerable women, corrupted public officials, and used violence and intimidation to silence your victims." Attorney General Pam Bondi sat in the front row, having personally requested to be present for this moment. The evidence showed your organization generated over $47 million through illegal activities. More importantly, you destroyed the lives of dozens of young women who trusted you. Judge Morrison referenced specific victim statements. Amanda Foster wrote that she still suffers nightmares and panic attacks. Sarah Martinez has been unable to pursue her career dreams due to trauma. Jennifer Walsh is dead, and her family believes you are responsible. Fitzgerald made a final plea for leniency. "Your Honor, my client recognizes the pain he has caused. He's prepared to make financial restitution to all victims." "Mr. Fitzgerald, financial compensation cannot undo years of systematic abuse and exploitation." Judge Morrison turned to address Diddy directly. "Do you wish to make a statement before sentencing?" Diddy spoke for the first time during the proceedings. "I maintain my innocence, Your Honor. I believe I was convicted based on false testimony from people seeking money." His words angered the victims present. Several shook their heads in disgust. At his continued denial, "Mr. Combs, your refusal to accept responsibility demonstrates a complete lack of remorse. The evidence of your guilt was overwhelming, yet you continue to blame your victims." Judge Morrison consulted her notes. The federal sentencing guidelines recommend 25 years to life imprisonment. However, given the scope of your criminal enterprise, the number of victims, and your complete lack of remorse, I am imposing the maximum sentence. The courtroom held its breath. "Sean Combs, I sentence you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on the racketeering conspiracy charge. Additionally, I impose concurrent sentences of 25 years on each of the remaining 16 counts." The verdict was final. Life in prison with no chance of release. Diddy showed no emotion as the sentence was pronounced. Federal marshals approached to escort him from the courtroom for the final time. Outside, victim Amanda Foster addressed the media. "This sentence means he can never hurt anyone else. That's all we ever wanted for the nightmare to end." Pam Bondi concluded her statement. "Today marks the end of one of the most extensive criminal enterprises we've ever prosecuted. Sean Combs will spend the rest of his life in federal prison, where he belongs." As Diddy was transported to a DX Florence, the Supermax federal prison in Colorado, his former associates continued cooperating with ongoing investigations into corruption within law enforcement and the entertainment industry. The Combs criminal enterprise was dismantled completely. His business assets were seized and would be used to compensate victims through a federal restitution fund. Years later, the case would be studied in law schools as an example of how wealth and celebrity status could not protect someone from accountability. For serious crimes, Sean Diddy Combs, once one of the most powerful figures in entertainment, would spend the remainder of his life in a 7 by 12-foot prison cell, his empire reduced to nothing but a cautionary tale about the consequences of unchecked power and systematic abuse.